Hello everyone, I'm Brazen Eagle and thank you for joining me here. So, today we have a fairly serious topic for the video. So, from news.com.au, Australia's male suicide epidemic is much worse than previously thought. New research shows by Shannon Molly, published on May 29th. So, groundbreaking new research shows Australia's male suicide epidemic is worse than previously thought, with at-risk behavior among blokes up to 3 times higher than current estimates indicate. Mental health organization Beyond Blue has released a world-first study investigating ambulance call-outs to men experiencing acute mental health issues, self-harm, and suicidal instances. And it highlights an urgent need for hospital treatment reform, with current practices providing inadequate care, probably. Experts warn. Obviously, 78% of suicides were transported to the hospital. The study, titled Beyond the Emergency, found there were a staggering almost 30.2 thousand ambulance attendances for men who had attempted suicide or had suicidal thoughts between June 2015 and July 2016. But existing data, taken from Hospital Emergency Department presentation statistics, identified about 10,000 cases in the same period because of the way patients were classified. This research tells us that suicide-related presentations to our health services by men triple when measured by ambulance data rather than hospital data alone. It tells us that what we know about male suicide is just the tip of the iceberg, Beyond Blue Chair Julia Gillard said. On average, 6 men will take their own lives each day in Australia. Wow. The organization's chief executive, Georgie Harmon, said there was a revolving door of admissions to emergency rooms when alternative treatment options could be more effective. It's a view shared by Monash University professor Don Loveman, who led the research and said there's an urgent need for better care. If they don't have life-threatening injuries, they shouldn't be at emergency departments, yet paramedics feel they have too few alternatives. Professor Loveman said, "Our paramedics need more support, and people with acute mental health issues or who feel suicidal need better models of care." Luke Richards represents the issues surrounding mental health emergencies, having experienced treatment failure in 2012 when he attempted to take his own life. The 45-year-old was left on a stretcher in a hospital corridor for 14 hours until he was eventually seen by psychiatric staff and then released. And apparently this is a picture of Luke Richards. It was a Labor Day long weekend, and somewhere then I tried to take my own life, and I was admitted to the hospital for the first time, Mr. Richards told the website. These amazing paramedics came to get me. They were fantastic. They took me to the hospital, and that's when the care ended. It was a completely different story. I felt like I was abandoned, because what got me there was self-inflicted. They really didn't care. They didn't really care too much. He said no one checked on him during the time he was left alone. The first time a health worker spoke to him was the next day when he was taken for an MRI that was meant for someone else. Whoever was able to deal with me only came on duty at 10 o'clock the next morning, Mr. Richards said. They asked me about what had happened. By that time, I just wanted to get out and go home. I told them whatever I thought they needed to hear. That's on me, granted, I lied. But they sent me on my way. I didn't have my wallet. My phone was dead. They said goodbye, and I wandered out to find my way home, still in shock about what I've done. Mr. Richards doesn't blame hospital staff for any ill feelings towards them, saying the hospital is one of the busiest in the cities. There could have been some really good reasons why it happened. I'm not angry or resentful about it, but it shows how much work needs to be done to care for people in this situation. Ms. Harmon said the new research shows the complex nature of mental health treatment and the challenges that confront paramedics, and illustrates the urgent need for system reform. In particular, we must stop the revolving door of acute presentations to hospital emergency departments by valuing and investing more in community-based supports and alternative pathways to deal with immediate crisis. Suicide is the biggest killer of Australian adult men. Wow, I did not know it was the #1 killer. But with an average of 6 males taking their lives every day. Investments in care and public awareness campaigns have failed to lower the startling statistic. The research also found that only 14% of ambulance staff had received adequate training for mental health patients, and 2/3 felt underprepared to respond to mental health needs. It recommends better training for paramedics, sustained use of coded ambulance records to identify and monitor community health needs, and a sweeping overhaul of the current service system. After his experience, Mr. Richard began a long road to recovery, entering rehabilitation for alcoholism and later joining Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, I hit rock bottom. I was ready to do what I needed to get sober. I was supported by doctors, my family, the AA community. It was a tough road back, but I made it. I consider myself to be recovered. He met his now wife, and they have 2 young sons. I'm so sorry about that, Mr. Richards, though. Mr. Richards works in online brand protection and has become an ultra-marathon swimmer. He is a men's mental health and addiction recovery advocate and speaks about his experiences in a bid to raise awareness. I'm in a great place now, he said. Wow. You know, without going too deep into this article seems, however, really to only focus on preventing men from completing their suicide attempts. Now, this is from Australia, but there's information here that we can take that can be used for the US, for Canada, Germany, UK, France, all the Western countries. It's good that this article has brought more attention to the suicide, especially the male suicide situation that we currently have. But it doesn't really mention why men decide to commit suicide. Now, part of the answer here is from the story of this man on screen, Luke Richards. He says that when he tried to commit suicide and he was taken to a hospital, he was supported and received care. However, when the care ended eventually, of course, and Richards literally felt like he was abandoned. He told the author of the article that no one checked up on him during the time he was left alone. He didn't want to be alone and isolated. Men sometimes want to be by themselves at peace, but some other times men do want support and people to talk to and relate to. However, to this man's credit, he doesn't blame the hospital or the people, working in the hospital, but this is a growing issue in Western countries. Men feel isolated and alone. And you know what? Men just don't always want to be isolated and alone. Sometimes it's good to be isolated and alone to really find your own path, but not all the time. But luckily for Richards, he has recovered and has bettered himself. But not all men, though, have taken that journey. On average, this article says that 6 Australian men commit suicide each and every day. Let's see. Suicide is the biggest killer of Australian adult men. 6 a day. And on average, 6 a day. That's a lot of guys. Obviously, suicide is big in the US, Canada, and other countries like that, especially for white males. But, for example, let's see, do I have it pulled up here? Yes, I do. Suicide is a leading cause of death within the United States. This page is from 2017, I believe, so I believe that, down here. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, WISCAR's leading cause of death reports in 2017. Suicide was the 10th leading cause of death overall in the U.S., claiming the lives of over 47,000 people in 2017. Let's see, where does it say, but for men? And there's a table here detailing leading cause of death in the United States. I believe that this is both men and women combined, unless I can't see where it says male or female. However, in 2017, here it is. Here in 2017, the total population for age-adjusted related suicides, the total population was 14 per 100,000. However, in the U.S., the male suicide rate was 22.4 deaths per 100,000 males, and overall made up just shy under 70% of all suicide deaths. That's a big number of men committing suicide, at least in 2017 alone. And you can tell from this graph that the number or the rate of suicides is ever increasing. Not here in Australia, but in Australia in 2017, the male suicide rate was 19.1 per 100,000 males, which is roughly similar to the U.S. suicide rate in the same year, and represented 75.1% of all intentional self-harm deaths, while the female rate was 6.2 per 100,000 females. And I guess basically intentional self-harm is the 10th ranked leading cause of deaths for males, while it does not appear in the top 20 leading causes of death for females. I even brought up the Canadian suicide by gender, which is really just sex, in Canada. This information obviously is from 2012 because I could not find information for 2017. However, the Canadian male suicide rate, in 2012 at least, was 17.3 per 100,000 men and 5.4 for every 100,000 females in 2012. We go back to the US chart in 2012, the rate was about 20.3 for men. So that's roughly similar across Western countries. Now, I'm not saying that females should reach equality with men in terms of suicide, but we gotta recognize that men are disproportionately killing themselves and they need support. But you gotta ask yourself, why would men, do this? Why would they commit suicide? Well, I would argue that it can be individual issues that eat away at men, that eventually compound on each other, that, compress on the individual men, and especially when it involves life's expectations. One event could make a man, inch a little bit closer towards suicide. Another event happens, more things happen, and then the man just can't take it anymore. However, I would say divorce has is a good indicator that suicide is potentially more likely to occur. And this is where I have another article for us within the same video. This is from hashimashi.com, Suicide After Divorce. This page, though, presents a reality that men suffer through when they do divorce. And here are 17 reasons why men commit suicide after divorce that you probably, or maybe you do, but probably don't know. So, why do men commit suicide after divorce? Men commit suicide after divorce at a rate 3 to 4 times higher than women, a shocking divorce and suicide statistic. And marital breakdown is a factor from the Canadian Mental Health Association. The tipping point for many men is divorce, says Professor John Oliffe, a University of BC, or British Columbia, psychology researcher. Professor Oliffe is part of a team fighting male depression and suicide. Divorce is a classic factor in suicide because divorced men are at high risk to become isolated. There are so many examples of good men ending their own lives. North American men divorced are 8 times more likely to commit suicide than women. Professor A.J. Kapausa used data to analyze the effects of marital status on suicide risk. He found that divorced men were more than twice as likely to commit suicide as married men. And he found that divorced men are almost 10 times more likely to kill themselves than divorced women. Yes. The research of A.J. Kapauska reveals that each year, more than 3,600 divorced men, about 10 every day, commit suicide. Wow. And that was a study done in 2000. Wow. Divorce should mean the end of a marriage, not the end of the life for a man or woman. Something is wrong with the divorce process that results in the deaths of so many men, fathers, husbands, sons, and brothers. Why should any man marry, knowing that there is clear data that divorce means certain death for so many men? And for every divorced man that commits suicide, his children are left behind, haunted and traumatized by their father's death. First, the children have the trauma of their parents' divorce. That actually is oftentimes extremely traumatic for children. But then, secondly, they experience the unimaginable, the permanent loss of their father. Not to mention the families of divorcing men who prefer to kill themselves than live. The higher suicide rates among divorced men is an indictment of the flawed legal divorce process. No divorce should end in death, only an amicable separation of the marriage. Well, so be it. We must condemn the legal divorce process, which results in the death of 3,600 men every year. And if you want to come to any of these pages that I have, they're all in the description below. And if you want to check out this link, it'll be within this page, which is linked in my description. And do you wonder why your husband killed himself after a divorce? Honestly, the wife probably doesn't care. But the purpose of this article is to 1. Help prevent men from committing suicide after divorce. 2. Explain why divorce makes men more suicidal than women. 3. Serve as a survival guide for men and those who love them going through or after a divorce. 17 reasons why men commit suicide after divorce. Well, this article mostly talks about divorce, but some of these issues can also be attributed to, not divorce, just living. Anyways, here is 17 reasons. But we first got to start with the wrong reasons assumed for why men commit suicide after divorce. Some say that men commit suicide after divorce because they do not want to pay child support or alimony. Let's examine that assumption. Is that a believable reason for a man to commit suicide? A man who has spent most of his waking hours supporting his family. Will such a man decide to take his life now because he cannot bear the thought of providing for his kids? And the answer, of course, is no. It is akin to saying that people will commit suicide when their taxes go up, or because they have to pay higher healthcare premiums. This smacks of a snarky gender condensation. It is an insult to the men who do commit suicide to trivialize the act of suicide down to escaping a financial burden, no matter how heavy that weight may be. Some claim men cannot handle the rejection of their wife. However, divorce from a spouse is a different issue than divorce from your children. The parents are the ones who divorce. No man or woman should suffer divorce from their children. Men do not commit suicide after divorce because they cannot see their ex again. Men commit suicide after divorce when they no longer have a relationship with their children. Others say men commit suicide after divorce because men need a woman to take care of them. What a ridiculous reason for a man to off himself. And now, it's time for the 17 reasons. Number 1, the deadbeat dad label. So, who is a deadbeat? The father, of course, even if he pays the child support and or alimony imposed by the court. Why is the father always a deadbeat? Because the child support and alimony payment will always result in less money for his ex and kids. The divided family now has to support 2 rents or 2 mortgages for 2 households. His ex and kids are feeling the pain of less money as a result of the divorce. Access to less money than in the past leads to open hostility to the father. Even if he pays the exact amount ordered by the court, there is a new false narrative that he does not pay his fair share. Do you think you can escape being accused of deadbeat dad if you are a famous millionaire? Even Brad Pitt cannot escape. What chance does a common man have? Even Brad Pitt was divorced. Take action for yourself and get the book. Get the book 10 Ways to Avoid Being a Deadbeat Dad. Well, just don't get married. Number 2, alienation and estrangement from children. What happens when the mother considers the division of money by the court to be unfair or fair but unsatisfactory? Well, let's be real. They'll always probably consider the money from the court or the ex-husband to be unsatisfactory. The father almost has no chance of ever having a good relationship with his children again. His status changes from dad to deadbeat dad. The mother will impute that the father can afford more money than the court decided. He is in a losing battle for the heart and minds of his kids. As a result of this dissatisfaction, the mother influences the children to hate their father for lack of financial support, despite 80% of all marriages being initiated by the woman. Whether this influence is intentional or not, the result is alienation or estrangement. Misery is unmet expectations. In this case, misery occurs when the mother expects a larger share in the monthly income. Who is the target of this misery? The father. It is unbearable for a man to feel loathing from his own children, especially when he does his best to support them. He also has nowhere else to turn for more financial or emotional support. In this case, a man no longer feels that he has a reason to live. The mental pain of loathing from his own children is enough to send him over the edge. The only option left at this point is to commit suicide to get relief from this great pain of isolation and derision. The chronic demonization of the father can lead to permanent alienation or estrangement. Can you imagine how a permanent estrangement from your children would feel? Estrangement between a father and his children is enough to cause clinical depression. Estrangement from children is the reason why divorce and suicide risk is so high for men. The same reason that women are less likely to commit suicide is the same reason that divorced men are more likely to commit suicide. The temporary or permanent estrangement from their children. Do you fear alienation or estrangement from your children? And basically number 3, financial ruin. A man can end up paying half of his income for child support and alimony with another 20 or 30% on taxes and debt from legal fees. If he is poor, he will not feel much difference in his lifestyle. The court does not have much time to take from him, or does not have much to take from him at all. And if he is wealthy, he can always hire lawyers who will protect him from the court. Well, Not always. Too will probably actually feel some sort of difference after divorce. Unless you're talking about like the extreme rich, like billionaires like Trump or something. However, divorce will mostly affect the middle-class man. He is in a financial crisis. There is, for example, the refusal of the court to allow for any economic downturns. If his business has a difficult year, the child support and alimony payment has no immediate sliding scale. As a result, he is subject to monthly threats of arrest and jail by the child support agencies. Forget about retirement in style. In the old days, he dreamed of himself relaxing on the beach or in a second home. Now, while sitting in his one-room apartment, he knows that one room might be as good as it gets. After 10, 20, or even more years of working and saving, he now has to start all over again. Suicide becomes a more attractive option than sitting and stewing for the rest of his life, especially when he knows that he might end up homeless on the streets. There's also the threat of losing his professional license if he's not able to pay child support. In contrast to the enforcement of child support, the court will not enforce visitation. Number 4. Criminalization of a law-abiding citizen. Men report feeling as if the judge or opposing attorney in divorce court treats them like criminals. But his job, which the divorce court holds with high regard, treats him like a human being. This creates cognitive dissonance and the mental stress of living in conflicting realities. At his job, where the court wants him to remain successful to provide child support, he is not held in contempt. In fact, he might be held in high esteem with a title and responsibility. The divorce court, on the other hand, treats a man, a provider, a father, like a criminal. This ravaging of a man's self-esteem is another reason why the risk of divorce and suicide is so high for men. Number 5, losing the entire structure of family life and home. Yesterday, he had his wife and children around him. Today, he lives alone, without his family, especially without his kids. Before his divorce, he lived in a decent home and in a good neighborhood. But now, he finds himself in a garage, or an apartment, or in his friend's or mother's basement and living out of his car. And he will soon have to return the car because he cannot afford to pay for the lease. He realizes he no longer has a home. On top of that, he no longer has the funds to pay for his new small living quarters. Wherever they may be, this all contributes to a precipitous loss of self-esteem. And number 6, the dangerous libel. Men are vulnerable to character assassination by the court and their ex. A common tactic of opposing divorce lawyer is to persuade the judge that a father who loves his children is dangerous or depressed. Fear is a great persuader. If the judge believes there is credible fear that the father is dangerous, he will lose his relationship with his kids. All it takes is for the opposing side to accuse him of being dangerous. Even if the accusation is false, it is difficult to prove it false, because it is now a he said, she said argument, and you cannot prove a negative. And the judge will decide in favor of protecting the children from a dangerous father or dangerous male. 7. Needing a supervisor. Needing a supervisor to see your own children is a huge humiliation. Imagine if you can no longer be alone with your children. This further cements the idea in your children's minds that you are dangerous. As a result, their fear grows and they no longer relish the idea of being in your company. Not only do you have to see your kids with a supervisor, you are also the one who has to pay for the time of the supervisor. Number 8. Loss of total identity. Men after divorce are usually the ones who lose more than their marriage. Besides the marriage, he also loses his children, friends, and family who may now have become distant. As a result, he no longer recognizes his life. How do men feel after divorce about their lives? They feel cut out of their own family portrait, as if they no longer exist or never existed because the family they helped to create is gone. Shock is number 9. Men do not see the signs that their relationship is in trouble. By the time their wife decides to start divorce proceedings, it is too late. Unfortunately for men, they are not great mind readers. Unless their wife communicates that there are problems within their marriage, it is not enough to say that he should have known there is a problem from the signs. As a result, his wife knows that she is over and done with the marriage, sometimes years before her husband ever had a clue. When she does pull the trigger and serves him with divorce papers, he goes into shock. And she does not, because she has been planning the divorce for months or even years. She is a master chameleon and manipulator. The best way to deliver a message is to say it, especially when it comes to dissolving your entire family, not by giving hints or signs and expecting the other party to be aware. Some say that 80 or 75 to 80% of the time, the husband has no clue that the divorce is already in process. When he is not prepared for divorce papers, that shock alone can send him into a tailspin of depression, reduced self-esteem, bitterness, and anxiety. His ex might have thought that ambushing him with divorce papers in his driveway or to humiliate him in front of his kids, or at the office to embarrass him at work, was a wonderful idea. But in the end, if he suicides due to the shock, she only hurts her own children. Number 10 out of 17. The loss of reality, which brings us to the point of non-existence. A man after divorce is more likely to feel as if he has lost all touch with reality. For his ex, she remains in the marital home, and she remains with the children. Most of the time. She is not treated like a pariah like by the child support agency, the court, or court-appointed guards. Her reality is not too different from her life before divorce, other than the fact that her ex is no longer in the home. But for him, his life is upside down. Suicide becomes a much more attractive option than constant degradation. Number 11. Disgrace kills, not divorce. The court does not decide divorce cases overnight. The divorce process can take years. First comes the delivery of the divorce action to appear at the opposing lawyer's office or to appear in court. Imagine you receive a subpoena on your front lawn in front of your kids or neighbors, or in your office in front of your coworkers and boss. You will experience a mountain of disgrace. Once your office and coworkers are aware of the divorce proceedings, a cloud will hang over your head. Instead of working, you will prepare next or net worth statements. You will try to keep up with lawyer fees and juggle court dates and your job. Your work will suffer. You will write, answer, and edit divorce papers written by yourself, or if you can afford, your lawyer. Every day in the divorce process and after is another day of disgrace. Number 12. A catastrophic year or more. The divorce process can take 1 to 2 years, even longer. Sometimes. If he is not able to keep focus on his job, he runs the risk of losing his employment. Imagine you lose your children, marriage, home, friends, neighbors, and career in the same year. This explains the connection of divorce and suicide. These are the factors that lead to depression for a father, separation or worse, estrangement from his children, as well as the sensing of the rejection of his children, the demonization by his ex, the court, and the child support enforcement agency, the loss of money, home, car, career, neighbors, friends, and community. These all lead to depression. Absolutely. Severe and chronic depression is a clear suicide risk. And of course, number 13 is loss of love and affection. Your ex-wife still has the love and affection of her children and how they need her. The children have their own trauma and already have lost their father. He has gone from their physical space and is a deadbeat in their heads, even when he is complying with the court. All the father feels is that everyone is angry at him for not providing enough money. Even when he gives as ordered by the court, the expectation is that he should be giving more. Men are more than their wallets, though. He only feels that his family wants money and nothing more from him. He is nothing more than an ATM machine, exactly. There's no love or affection. This loss of love and affection is another prime reason for the divorce and suicide risk for men. Men are more than just their wallets. 14. No support. A man is less likely to have the emotional and friend support that a woman has, especially if he has been working in a career during his marriage. A woman is more likely to have developed emotional bonds outside of her job with friends. A man is more likely to focus on his work. When the divorce hits, he is only left with work and no more emotional support from his family. Now, after work, instead of going to a home, he is more likely to go to his new post-divorce living quarter and stew over what went wrong. As a result, the sense of isolation for a man is intense after divorce. This severe sense of isolation is another trigger for men to commit suicide after divorce. 15. Negative side effects of antidepressants. When women prepare for divorce, one strategy they are advised to use by friends or lawyers is to get their husband on antidepressants. They suggest and sometimes insist that their husband take medications for your own good or to take off the edge. This sounds like the woman is trying to kill the man. Once you are on antidepressants, you are now assumed to be flawed and someone to fear. The greatest persuader is fear of danger, and a man on antidepressants becomes a frightful character in the eyes of the law. Now that you are on meds, the judge assesses that you might be dangerous. Now the judge will rule to order visitation with a supervisor, and this starts the ball rolling to estrangement from your own children. Women push antidepressants to help them get an advantage in court and do not think about catastrophic consequences for their husband's or children's physical and mental health. The sad reality is that the judge will see a devoted father as dangerous to his children. All the judge sees is that the dad is using antidepressants and is now a danger to himself and children. Once you are on antidepressants, you face a new danger to your mental and physical health. Antidepressants do have side effects that double the risk of suicide, which is why most antidepressants come with warning labels that could cause suicidal ideation or suicide. If he does not commit suicide, he still faces the onslaught of slowed movement and night sweats, along with other side effects like insomnia, loss of feeling in extremities, nightmares, and general malaise. 16. No future. Some men after divorce see no future. His wife still has a life, a family, the children, and, most likely, friends. He sees a life of struggling to pay the bills, avoiding jail, and with no emotional feedback, and worse, no relationship with his kids. Then what's the point of frickin' living? He sees no path to living a good life. The mental pain of knowing that he has no path to live to a life worth living leads a man to think that the best course of action is to end his life now. Why? Because it feels that the key aspects of his life, which gave his life meaning, are over. So, since it basically already is over, he might as well end it. Men have to find meaning in their lives, and once you rob men of raising a family, what else do they have to live for? And last one, 17. From dad to visitor or him. How do you recreate your life after 10, 20, 30 years of marriage and its dissolvement? The wife's life is much the same. The father's is in upheaval. The losses of marriage, children, income, home, security, stability, and pride. They all happen in a short amount of time. This causes enough shock and humiliation for the father to contemplate suicide. She is still the mother, and the father becomes a visitor. No one likes to lose their status. The demotion from father to visitor, or him, is a catastrophic humiliation. Here is where the go solo movement for men picked up steam. Single men see the catastrophe that divorced men experience. Why would they want to marry and risk the same? You cannot blame a young man today if he swears off marriage and children, especially the children of divorce. Considering the state of divorce in the country and the real bias of the court system, and even more, especially the children of a father who did commit suicide after divorce, they see a clear picture of what happens to a man after marriage, children, and divorce. It's not a pretty picture. The long-term consequences of divorce go beyond family disunity and estrangement. If a father after divorce ends up in depression, job loss, and or suicide, do you think his children would want to marry? The chances are that his children do not want to take such a risk, especially his sons. Do you think characterizing the legal divorce court process as a slaughterhouse of men is an exaggeration? Do you think it is too over the top? Have you read the story of Jeremy A. from Canada who committed suicide after divorce court screwed him? The divorce court and his exes caused the suicide of him. They committed against Jeremy many of the egregious 17 reasons divorce and suicide is a fatal brew for men noted above. The legal actions they took against Jeremy are a disgrace. This divorce court, judge, and plaintiff's attorney and his exes all have blood on their hands. Just because the legal system weaponized divorce courts against men is not a reason to use them. Every wife must be aware that if she unleashes the man-hating divorce court against her husband, it can result in his suicide. But you gotta realize, women don't care about men. They just use men. Women see men as a transactional utility. That's basically what it comes down to. Next time you hear an ex-wife wonder why her husband committed suicide after divorce, have her read this excerpt of what Lawrence Killiam of Meninist reported in March of 2017. In today's court system, divorce courts are clearly stacked against men. One only has to look at the historical data to see that women are unfairly granted child custody at about 85% of the time and receive over 94% of all child support dollars paid. These battles can be vicious, full of conflict, and can rage for years. In Canada, such a struggle has unfortunately ended in tragedy. Jeremy A., the media isn't of course using his full name since some of his children shared, was involved in a legal battle with an ex-wife with 2 daughters, a former fiancé who also has a young son, and his present wife. According to the Canadian news outlet The National Post, Jeremy unsuccessfully had applied for an order varying the amount of child support and spousal support he had to pay his former wife, a total of $6,500 a month. Jesus, that's a lot of money. She in turn was seeking he be found in contempt of another order and fined an additional $10,000. The judge adjourned those issues. Another woman with whom he'd been briefly engaged and fathered a son after his divorce was seeking retroactive and ongoing child support for their son. Both these applications were successful, bringing his total child and spousal support to about $8,000 a month. Jesus. But then, in fairness, that woman is herself a family court lawyer. Don't ever get involved with female lawyers. Don't. Just do not. Don't get involved with females at this point. Early on in the morning of March 9th, Jeremy apparently rigged his truck so that when he drove down an embankment at the end of Page Road in Abbotsford, British Columbia, his neck would break. And this apparently is his suicide note. Family law needs reform. I recommend mandated lower costs and less reward for false claims of abuse. False claims. Parental alienation is devastating. I loved my children as much as a husband and father could. I see no light. Recommend. An authority consistent during high conflict separations. It is exploited in family law. Sorry, Dad and Angie. I'm very sorry. Jesus. This is devastating. This is a man that, because of how the law is structured, felt like he had nowhere to go. He ended up declaring bankruptcy and paid more than $330,000 in legal fees, according to his wife. Jesus. He was chased by family management agencies and even had agencies moving to take away his driver's license and passport. His ex-wife was even supposed to get his pension. On top of that, he hadn't been able to see his daughters for almost a year. They had been completely separated from him. Angela knew he was in despair, but weeps that she didn't realize the depths of it. Oh, come on, bull. I just didn't know, she sobbed on the phone. If he could have seen those girls, he could have handled all this, National Post reported. Yeah, I doubt it. His bank accounts were locked. He lost his homes, his vehicle, his business. You emasculate a man and take away his ability to provide. He's a human being. He has limits. Yeah, but you pushed him that far. Hopefully we can learn from this tragedy and bring the change we need into the court systems that push people to these lengths. And of course, if you want to see this article, any of these pages, they're in the description below. Man, whew. I understand that, yes, this has been a very long video, but this message needs to be out there in the media and repeated often enough that men get the message. Men need support, and the institutions that men used to have to cope with life have been and are continuing to be destroyed. Fathers, for example, they used to be the mentors and eventual friends of their sons when they came of age. But since the 1950s, let's see, do I have that statistic up here? I do not have that statistic up here. Anyways, I will have this statistic in the description below as well. But since the 1950s, the percentage of unmarried births has been steadily increasing. Unmarried births. Right now, 41% of all children in the U.S. are born to unmarried mothers, and that will, of course, cause all sorts of emotional, social, and mental issues for society. Children need strong fathers, especially past the age of 5. However, the attacks on the nuclear family, blaming men, especially white men, for all the problems in the world, tearing down male-only institutions, and claiming that men have unearned privileges has done tremendous damage for guys and for society at large. You know, why should men care for a society that hates them? Any reward for taking care of others has been stripped away from men. I mean, from Hashimashi, the story about Jeremy A. Clearly demonstrates all of this. Nevertheless, the continued attacks on men, who are of course the builders, the founders of society, are damaging everyone, and we got to recognize and understand to give men a break. To allow men their own private spaces and give recognition to the contributions and efforts. You know why? Because without strong men, we have nothing. And you know what? With that in mind, this is the end of the video. I'm Brazen Eagle. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something today, and I hope you support the men in your life.